Wings of Ember. The gates of Ash Spire Academy loomed above me, obsidian spires stretching toward the storm-laden sky. Lightning carved jagged streaks through the heavy clouds, illuminating the etching of a blazing phoenix carved into the iron gates. My stomach churned as I stepped closer. My destiny, or perhaps my doom, lay on the other side. My mother, General Kaylit Solara, had commanded entire battalions to victory, but here I was, her youngest daughter, trembling like a leaf in the wind. I'd spent my life in the shadow of her legend. She didn't want me here. She'd made that clear. Stay at the conservatory, Lyra, she'd said. You're better suited to books and scrolls than battlefields. But the fire in my veins wouldn't let me retreat. Not when my older brother, Dane, had proven himself one of the most gifted phoenix riders of his generation. Not when the whispers of rebellion brewed in the north, and Ashspire sought warriors to wield the ancient bond with phoenixes. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to burn bright, or die trying. The first trial was meant to weed out the weak. And it nearly killed me. We stood on a narrow ridge overlooking the Pyrestone Chasm, the canyon known for its searing updrafts of molten air and the winged predators that hunted anyone foolish enough to linger. A chain of ancient stone bridges crisscrossed the chasm, each one barely wide enough for a single person. Half of us wouldn't make it. The phoenixes won't bond with cowards, barked Commander Ayler. His voice echoed across the chasm, sharp as the blade strapped to his back. If you fall, you fall. If you hesitate, you'll be swept away by the updrafts. Only those who cross will advance to the next trial. The wind screamed around us as I stepped onto the first bridge. My heart pounded as I placed one foot in front of the other. The stones shifted beneath me, worn smooth by centuries of wind and ash. Ahead, a cadet screamed. I looked up just in time to see her slip, her arms flailing as the wind claimed her. She fell into the chasm below, her cry swallowed by the roar of molten air. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself forward. Halfway across the second bridge, the updraft surged, and I clung to the ropes for dear life. A shadow passed overhead, and I dared to glance upward. A massive creature with crimson wings circled above the chasm, its talons gleaming. A firehawk. The beast swooped low, its screech deafening. I threw myself flat as its talons raked the air where I'd been standing moments before. It veered away, but it wouldn't be the last. Firehawks had been known to pick off cadets during the trials. I clenched my jaw and pushed forward. By the time I reached the other side, my legs were shaking and my lungs burned. Only a dozen of us made it. Out of the 40 who had stood on the ridge, more than half had fallen. Or been taken. The second trial tested our combat skills. Paired against each other, we fought in the arena under the watchful eyes of the Phoenix Riders. The commanders sat in a high balcony overlooking the sand, their phoenixes perched behind them, flames flickering along their feathers. My opponent was a tall, broad-shouldered boy named Kieran, who'd already proven himself ruthless in the sparring rings. As we circled each other, I could feel the eyes of the commanders boring into me. He struck first, a quick feint followed by a low sweep of his staff. I barely dodged in time, the wood whistling past my ribs. I countered with a strike of my own, aiming for his exposed side, but he blocked it effortlessly. You should have stayed home, Solara, he sneered. No phoenix will bond with you. Anger flared in my chest, hot and wild. I spun away from his next strike, using the momentum to bring my staff around in a wide arc. It cracked against his shoulder, and he stumbled back, cursing. He recovered quickly, his strikes growing more aggressive. I was faster, but he was stronger. He drove me back toward the edge of the arena, and I knew I had seconds before he forced me out of bounds. As he lunged for the final blow, I dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. He hit the sand hard, and before he could recover, I pressed the end of my staff against his throat. Yield, I said, breathing hard. His glare could have melted steel, but he nodded. Yield. The commanders exchanged murmurs in the balcony above, and I couldn't tell if they were impressed or unimpressed. Either way, I had won. The final trial was the most dangerous of all, the bonding. We were led to the volcanic plateau where the phoenixes nested. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground was littered with shards of obsidian and charred bones. The phoenixes watched us from their perches, their eyes glowing like embers. This is where you prove yourself, said Commander Ayler. If a phoenix deems you worthy, it will bond with you. If not, his gaze swept over us, and his meaning was clear. Many cadets didn't survive the bonding. One by one, we stepped forward. Some cadets were chosen immediately, a phoenix descending from the sky in a blaze of fire to land before them. Others were ignored, or attacked. When my turn came, I stepped onto the plateau, my heart hammering. The heat was suffocating, and I could feel the eyes of the phoenixes on me. I walked slowly, my gaze sweeping the cliffs. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a screech split the air, and a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see a massive phoenix descending, its wings wreathed in flames. Its feathers shimmered like molten gold, and its eyes burned with an ancient, unyielding light. It landed before me, the ground trembling beneath its weight. My breath caught as it lowered its head, its fiery gaze meeting mine. For a moment, the world fell away. I could feel the phoenix's power, wild and untamed, surging through me like a tempest. It was testing me, probing the depths of my soul. I didn't flinch. I met its gaze head-on, refusing to back down. Then, the bond snapped into place, a blazing connection that lit up my mind like a star. The phoenix let out a triumphant cry, and flames erupted around us. The other cadets shielded their faces, but the fire didn't burn me. When the flames died down, the phoenix lowered itself, and I climbed onto its back. Its feathers were warm beneath my hands, and I could feel its heartbeat, steady and strong, beneath my fingers. As we took to the sky, the wind rushing past us, I felt a fierce, unrelenting joy. I had proven myself. I had earned my place. I wasn't just Lyra Solara anymore. I was a phoenix rider. And the world would never forget it. The wind roared in my ears as we soared higher, the phoenix's powerful wings slicing through the storm-laden skies. I clung tightly to its neck, marveling at the strength I felt coursing through our bond. It was as if every beat of its wings pulsed through my veins, a rhythm that synced perfectly with my own heartbeat. The volcanic plateau quickly shrank below us, and I could see the other cadets, those who had survived, staring up in awe. Even Kieran, whose earlier sneers had carved doubt into my confidence, stood frozen, his face pale. I am Ember. The phoenix's voice resonated in my mind, deep and commanding. It wasn't words, exactly, but a feeling, an essence I understood instinctively. I'm Lyra, I murmured, though I had no idea if it needed my introduction. You are mine now, Lyra Solara. As I am yours. Asterisk. A swell of pride surged through me. I wasn't just some timid girl from the conservatory anymore. I was bonded to a phoenix, and not just any phoenix. Ember radiated power. Even the commanders, standing on the cliffs far below, looked impressed, their gazes following us as we circled overhead. But there was no time to bask in the moment. Lyra Solara, Commander Ayler's voice cut through the air, amplified by his own phoenix's magic. Return to the ground immediately. The bonding is over. The trials are complete. Reluctantly, I urged Ember to descend. The phoenix obeyed, though I could feel its resistance, a simmering impatience. It didn't want to land. It wanted to keep flying, to keep testing its limits, and mine. When we touched down, the other cadets stepped back, their expressions a mix of awe and wariness. Ember's flames hadn't fully receded, and the heat radiating from its body was enough to make the air shimmer around us. Commander Ayler approached, his own phoenix, an older, battle-scarred creature with dark bronze feathers, following close behind. He studied me for a long moment, his sharp eyes narrowing. Impressive, he said finally. Few cadets bond with a phoenix of Ember's lineage. The Ashbourne line hasn't chosen a rider in over a century. I blinked. Ashbourne, I had heard of them in the old stories, phoenixes descended from the first flame, said to be the most powerful of their kind. But those were legends, tales told to scare children or inspire soldiers. I didn't know, I stammered. Ayler's gaze hardened. You do now. And you'd best be ready, Solara. That bond will make you a target. The next weeks at Ashspire were grueling. With the trials complete, the surviving cadets, only 15 of us, were thrown into the rigorous training regimen of the Phoenix Riders. Every day was a test, a struggle to survive and prove ourselves worthy of the bond we had forged. Combat training became my new reality, with every mistake punished by bruises and exhaustion. The instructors drilled us relentlessly, teaching us to fight not only on the ground but also in the air, where the wind and flames added a new layer of complexity. But it wasn't just physical. The bond with a phoenix demanded constant attention. Ember's thoughts and emotions were always in the back of my mind, a constant hum that grew louder if I ignored it. It was exhilarating, but also exhausting. Some days, I felt like I was drowning in the sheer intensity of it all. You're pushing too hard, Dane said one evening, finding me in the training yard after everyone else had left. My brother's phoenix, a sleek, golden creature named Solis, perched nearby, watching me with a calm intensity. I have to, I replied, wiping sweat from my brow. If I don't, someone else will outpace me. Someone else will die. Dane interrupted, his voice sharp. This isn't just about proving yourself, Lyra. It's about surviving. You can't do that if you burn yourself out. I glared at him. You don't understand. You've always been the perfect soldier, the one everyone looks up to. No one questions if you belong here. But me, every step I take, I have to fight for it. You think I can just take it easy? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to me. Not to Mother. And certainly not to Commander Ayler. But he was wrong. I did have something to prove, to myself, if no one else. The first mission came sooner than any of us expected. A caravan carrying supplies to the northern outposts had been ambushed by rebel forces, and a team of Phoenix Riders was dispatched to intervene. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission, observe, report back, and, if necessary, engage. I was paired with Kieran and 2 other cadets, both of whom had bonded with smaller, swifter phoenixes. Kieran, unsurprisingly, made it clear he wasn't thrilled about my inclusion. Just stay out of the way, he snapped as we prepared to take off. His phoenix, a dark, sleek creature named Shade, flared its wings impatiently. I bit back a retort, focusing instead on calming Ember. The phoenix's agitation mirrored my own, flames flickering along its wings. We took to the skies, the cold wind biting at my cheeks as we flew northward. Below us, the landscape shifted from rolling hills to jagged cliffs and dense forests. The world seemed so small from this height, but the weight of the mission pressed heavily on my shoulders. When we reached the ambush site, the wreckage was worse than I'd expected. The caravan had been reduced to smoldering ruins, and the bodies of soldiers and merchants lay scattered across the road. But we weren't alone. The rebels were still there, sifting through the wreckage. At least a dozen of them, armed with crossbows and blades. But what made my blood run cold was the massive beast standing among them, a wyvern, its scales black as night and its eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. "Kieran," I hissed, pulling Ember to a hover beside him. "We need to report back. We're outnumbered." But Kieran's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the wyvern. "No. We strike now. If we let them go, they'll hit another caravan, and next time, there'll be no survivors." Before I could stop him, he dove, Shade's wings folding tight as they plummeted toward the rebels. Cursing under my breath, I urged Ember to follow. The other cadets hesitated for a moment before joining the attack. The battle was chaos. Ember's flames lit up the sky as we swept low over the rebels, scattering them like leaves in the wind. Arrows whistled past me, but I focused on the wyvern, which let out an ear-splitting roar as it took to the air. It was massive, far larger than any phoenix, with leathery wings that blotted out the sky. As it lunged for Kieran, I dove toward it, Ember's flames roaring to life. The impact jolted through me as Ember collided with the wyvern, talons raking across its scaled hide. The beast roared in fury, snapping its jaws at us, but we darted away, faster than it could follow. "Lyra," Kieran shouted, "distract it. I'll go for the rider." I barely had time to process his words before the wyvern turned on us, its massive wings churning the air. Ember let out a fierce cry, and I felt its fire surging through me. We weren't going to run. We were going to fight. The wyvern's roar echoed through the canyon as it hurtled toward us, its jaws open wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Ember veered sharply to the left, dodging the beast's snapping maw, and I tightened my grip on the reins. My heart hammered in my chest, but the bond between us was a steady blaze, grounding me. "Stay calm," Ember's voice echoed in my mind, a low, steady presence amid the chaos. "Strike fast, strike true." The wyvern wheeled around, its claws raking the air. Ember surged upward, flames trailing in his wake, and I could feel his instincts pulling me toward a single, unified purpose: bring the beast down. Kieran and Shade darted below us, heading straight for the wyvern's rider, a tall figure clad in dark armor, gripping the reins with one hand and a long spear with the other. The wyvern thrashed, trying to protect its master, but Kieran moved with precision, his phoenix weaving between the wyvern's massive wings. "Lyra, now!" Kieran shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of battle. Ember let out a piercing cry, and I felt the fire building inside him, a searing pressure that begged for release. With a silent command, I urged him forward. Flames erupted from his wings as we dove straight for the wyvern, aiming for the vulnerable joint where its wing met its body. The fire struck true, and the beast let out a guttural shriek, its wing folding inward as it lost altitude. But it wasn't finished. With a powerful sweep of its tail, it lashed out, the barbed tip slamming into Ember's side. The impact knocked the breath out of me, and we spun through the air, the world tilting wildly. Ember steadied himself with a powerful beat of his wings, but I could feel his pain through the bond, a sharp, burning ache that mirrored my own. "I'm fine," Ember said, though his voice was strained. "Focus." The wyvern was flailing now, its injured wing making it sluggish. Kieran and Shade had managed to force the rider off balance, but they were running out of time. The other rebels on the ground were rallying, their crossbows aimed skyward, and I could see bolts glinting in the dim light as they loosed their arrows. "Kieran, pull back," I yelled, but he didn't listen. The wyvern's rider swung his spear in a wide arc, catching Shade's wing with the blunt end. Kieran cursed as his phoenix staggered midair, and the wyvern took the opening to lunge. "No." Without thinking, I urged Ember forward, closing the distance between us and the wyvern in a heartbeat. Ember's talons sank into the beast's back, and I swung my staff with all my strength, knocking the rider from his perch. The armored figure plummeted to the ground, hitting the rocks below with a sickening thud. But the wyvern wasn't done. Enraged, it twisted beneath us, its jaws snapping dangerously close. Ember released it, his wings flaring as we pulled back. Flames erupted from his beak, scorching the wyvern's remaining wing. With a final, agonized roar, the beast crashed to the ground, sending up a plume of dust and debris. The battlefield fell silent, save for the crackling of fire and the labored breathing of the phoenixes. Back at Ashspire, the aftermath of the mission hung heavy over us. We had succeeded in driving off the rebels, but it hadn't been without cost. One of the cadets, Rin, had taken a crossbow bolt to the chest and was in critical condition. Kieran's phoenix, Shade, bore deep gashes along its flank, and Ember's wounds, though less severe, still bled sluggishly despite the healer's best efforts. Commander Ayler's expression was grim as he addressed us in the briefing hall. "You were given clear orders: observe and report. Instead, you engaged a superior force and endangered not only yourselves but your phoenixes. This recklessness could have cost all of you your lives. Kieran opened his mouth to argue, but Aylar silenced him with a sharp glare. However, the commander continued, his tone grudging, you also showed bravery and resourcefulness. The Wyvern rider you killed was a high-ranking officer in the rebel forces. That is no small victory. His gaze shifted to me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. Lyra Solara, he said, you have proven yourself capable under pressure. But do not let this victory go to your head. The rebellion is growing stronger, and they will not take this defeat lightly. There will be consequences. That night, I found myself standing in the rookery, surrounded by the quiet hum of sleeping phoenixes. Ember lay in his nest, his golden feathers dulled with exhaustion but still glowing faintly in the dim light. You did well today, Ember said, his voice warm and steady. So did you, I replied, kneeling beside him. I ran a hand along his feathers, careful to avoid the bandaged wound on his side. But I can't stop thinking about what Aylar said. The rebellion, they're not just raiders or bandits. They're organized. Dangerous. That is why we fight. Ember's gaze met mine, his eyes burning with an unshakable resolve. The bond we share is not just a gift. It is a responsibility. To protect. To endure. To rise, even when the flames threaten to consume us. His words settled something inside me. The trials, the training, the battles, they weren't just about proving myself anymore. They were about something greater. As I left the rookery, the stars burning bright above Ashspire, I felt a new sense of purpose. The road ahead would be perilous, but I wasn't alone. With Ember by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. And in the distance, beyond the horizon, I could feel the storm brewing. The weeks that followed were relentless. The rebellion had begun to strike with increasing precision, targeting supply lines, outposts, and even smaller villages near Ashspire's borders. The academy turned into a war machine, training cadets faster, sending out squads of Phoenix riders daily. And all the while, I felt the weight of the battle against the rebellion looming over us. Ember and I grew stronger. Our bond deepened in ways I hadn't expected. I learned to hear his thoughts even in the heat of battle, to feel his instincts guiding my decisions. He wasn't just a partner, he was part of me, and I of him. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. It wasn't long before the rebellion made their boldest move yet. Ashspire Academy's alarms rang out in the dead of night, pulling us all from our beds. The rookery erupted into chaos as phoenixes screeched, their flames lighting the darkened sky. I threw on my armor and bolted for Ember's nest, finding him already awake, his wings flaring with anticipation. They're here, he said, and his words sent a chill through me. When I climbed onto his back and took to the sky, the scale of the attack became clear. Rebels swarmed the academy grounds, their black-armored wyverns cutting through the air like blades. Fires burned along the walls, and the clash of steel echoed across the cliffs. Commander Aylar's voice rang out above the chaos. Phoenix Riders, to the skies. Defend the academy at all costs. Ember surged forward, diving into the fray. I could feel the heat of his flames against my skin as we cut through the enemy lines, scattering wyverns and riders alike. But for every enemy we took down, another seemed to rise in their place. Lyra, on your left. Kieran's voice snapped me out of my focus. I twisted in the saddle just in time to see a rebel rider bearing down on us, his wyvern's jaws open wide. Ember swerved, narrowly avoiding the snapping teeth, and unleashed a torrent of fire that engulfed the beast. It roared in pain before spiraling to the ground. Kieran and Shade swooped in beside us, their wings cinched but steady. They're trying to breach the rookery, he shouted, if they destroy the phoenix eggs. I didn't need him to finish. Without the rookery, there would be no new phoenix riders, no way to replace the losses we'd already suffered. We won't let that happen, I said, determination hardening my voice. Together, we raced toward the rookery, where a group of rebels had broken through the outer defenses. They were dragging explosives toward the nests, their wyverns circling overhead to keep the defenders at bay. I tightened my grip on the reins. Ember, now! The phoenix dove, flames blazing around us as we struck the first group of rebels. Their screams were drowned out by the roar of fire and the screech of phoenixes defending their young. Kieran and Shade joined the fight, their strikes swift and brutal. But then I saw him. Standing in the center of the chaos was a figure in dark, jagged armor, a rider unlike any I'd seen before. His wyvern was massive, its scales glistening like obsidian in the firelight. The rebel leader. Be careful, Ember warned, his flames dimming slightly as we hovered. This one is different. The rebel leader turned his gaze toward me, and I felt a chill despite the heat of the battle. His wyvern lunged, its claws reaching for us, but Ember was faster. We dodged, circling around to find an opening. You're the one bonded to the Ashborn, the leader called, his voice carrying over the din. I've heard of you, Lyra Solara. Do you really think you can stand against me? I didn't answer. Words wouldn't win this fight. The battle was brutal. His wyvern moved with a speed and precision I hadn't expected, its strikes forcing Ember to dodge and counter in rapid succession. I could feel Ember's strength waning, the strain of the fight wearing on him. But then, an idea sparked in my mind. Ember, I said, focusing all my energy into our bond. We can't outmatch them in strength. But we can outthink them. The phoenix's flames flared in understanding. We darted upward, higher and higher, drawing the wyvern after us. The thinner air made it harder to breathe, but I pushed through, knowing we had to lure him into the perfect position. When we reached the clouds, I shouted, "Now!" Ember's flames erupted in a blinding burst of light, disorienting the wyvern and its rider. Before they could recover, we dove, twisting in a sharp arc to come up beneath them. The rebel leader didn't have time to react. Ember's talons raked across the wyvern's underbelly, and with a final, agonized roar, the beast plummeted to the ground, its rider still clinging to its saddle. The battle ended with the sunrise. The rebels had been driven back, but the cost had been steep. Dozens of cadets and phoenixes lay wounded or worse, and parts of the academy were little more than smoldering ruins. I stood in the rookery, watching as healers tended to the injured phoenixes. Ember was beside me, his feathers singed but his spirit unbroken. "You did well, Lyra." Commander Ayler's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He stood behind me, his expression grim but approving. "You've proven yourself as more than just a cadet. You're a leader now. A true phoenix rider." I nodded, though the weight of his words settled heavily on my shoulders. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. That night, as I stood on the cliffs overlooking the academy, Ember spoke to me again. "The rebellion will come again," he said. "And we will face them. Together." I placed a hand on his feathers, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "We will. And we'll rise stronger each time." The stars above burned bright, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, light endured. As long as Ember and I stood together, I knew we could face whatever came next. For we were more than phoenix riders. We were the flame that would ignite a new dawn.